Witam wszystkich bardzo serdecznie.
Hello everyone, Hag Sameach. My name is Rabbi Miriam Klimova. I live in Haifa in congregation Shirat Hayam. Today is the second day of Passover.
Postanowiłam, że nie możemy
So I decided that we have no choice. We have to talk about this beautiful festival of freedom. So
jego historii.
let's recall its history
Święto,
once again.
długą drogę
This holiday has come a long way in development from biblical times, from the Middle Ages to the present day.
Czym jest to święto?
So,
Żydzi co roku
what's this holiday festival about?
jedną i tą samą historię.
Jews retell the same story of the Exodus every year during the Passover Seder,
Pesach daje nam możliwość
when they set on their journey to the land of Israel.
od nowa przeżywać
Passover offers us the opportunity to relive a story of liberation rooted in the past, but it also places important demands on us here and now.
która stawia bardzo ważne wymagania do rzeczywistości i do przeszłości. Kiedy chcemy sobie przypomnieć, skąd pochodzi to święto,
So, what are the origins of this festival? We must open the Torah, the first book, Bereshit,
zobaczymy, że zgodnie z opowieścią
and there we'll see that according to the Torah, Yaakov and his sons descended into Egypt because of a great famine.
bardzo często każdego razu, kiedy
And very often, when something happens in Israel, and in biblical times it was usually famine,
ucieczką
the first place they choose to escape to was Egypt. Maybe
wiek XXI, rok
today it may seem funny, but nonetheless, today in the 21st century, in 2026, it's also a well known destination for Israelis. They can always go to Egypt.
staje się tak, że
But going back to our story,
jest na wysokiej pozycji.
over time,
Prawą ręką
Joseph held a high position in Pharaoh's court,
setek lat.
but a couple of hundred of years went by, and the friendship between Pharaoh and Joseph was forgotten, and the children of Israel became slaves, forced into hard labor.
Ciężkiej pracy. Po wielu latach niewoli
After many years of captivity, God appeared to Moses. Does anyone remember in what form he appeared? As a burning bush.
Tak.
Yes, exactly.
jest przez płonący krzew, mówił mu, polecił mu, żeby
And God instructed Moses to go to Pharaoh with his brother Aaron and demand the release of the people of Israel from slavery.
Gdy faraon odmówił,
When Pharaoh refused, God, through Moses and Aaron, sent 10 plagues upon Egypt.
14 dnia miesiąca Nisan,
On the 14th day of the month of Nisan, the day before the 10th plague, the most serious one, the children of Israel were commanded to offer a sacrifice, the Pesach sacrifice.
widzimy
We see it in the text in front of us.
większość historii wyjścia.
Most of the story of Exodus can be found in Parashat Bo, in the book of Shemot, and the sacrifice is already being called Pesach,
Pesachowa to jest Pesach.
the Passover sacrifice.
Że trzeba było zabić tą ofiarę.
And they tell us that we have to kill the sacrifice and apply some of the blood on the doorposts so that it will be known that this home is inhabited by Jews.
Nazwa Pesach, jeżeli będziemy szukać
So the name Pesach, if we want to find the etymology of this word, then first of all we can say it's an offering, the offering that was sacrificed on that specific night,
noc plagi pierworodnych,
the night of the plague of the firstborn, and then the offering of the Passover sacrifice. And this night is now called the night of the Seder.
przejdzie bardzo wiele tysiącleci.
So many thousands of years will pass until we come to a place where the Seder has been formed, but we'll get there step by step. So after this plague, Pharaoh relented and ordered the children of Israel to leave Egypt that same day, the first day of Passover. In the middle of the night, Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and told them, "Up, depart from among my people, you and the Israelites with you. Go worship God, as you said, far away from me."
W wielu społeczności istnieje zwyczaj postu pierworodnych.
In many Jewish communities, there is a custom of fasting for the firstborn, Ta'anit Behorot, on the eve of Passover, in remembrance of the fact that the firstborn of Israel were spared during the plague of the firstborn in Egypt, when all the firstborn of the Egyptians perished.
Ten zwyczaj jest przyjęty w tradycji żydowskiej.
This custom is not
Na przykład w większości
accepted in all Jewish communities. For example, most Jews from Yemen or other more eastern parts do not observe it. They don't know of it. So this is more related to the Ashkenazi tradition. And this fasting applies to men, the firstborn in their family.
ma w sobie kilka ciekawych rzeczy. Na
And there
przykład,
are
jeżeli
different interesting customs in specific situations. If the firstborn has not yet reached bar mitzvah age, sometimes the father fasts for him. In some traditions, the father fasts even if his wife is pregnant with the firstborn.
w dniu dzisiejszym
So the firstborn is still in the womb. So some say this is a tradition, this is not halacha, not a mitzvah from the Torah. So they organize a festive meal for Tanit Behorot to commemorate their firstborn, and everyone participates in this festive meal, and that means that you no longer have to fast. So this fast appears in various ways in our tradition. So what's next? On their journey, the children of Israel were saved at the Red Sea. We know what happened. Soon after the departure of the children of Israel, the Egyptians changed their minds and went after them to take them back into captivity. When they caught up with them, the Israelites were standing by the sea with nowhere to run. And then a pillar of cloud stopped the Egyptians by night, and the sea parted, and the Israelites passed through on the dry land. In the morning, the sea returned to its place, and Pharaoh and his army were drowned as they pursued them. According to the sages, the parting of the Red Sea occurred on the night of the seventh day of Passover. In addition to the commandment to offer the Passover sacrifice at that time, the people of Israel were also commanded for all generations to celebrate this festival for 7 days. Can someone read this text from Parashat Bo?
Kogo mogę prosić?
Po polsku.
Tak.
I będziecie przestrzegali tego jako
And you will fulfill this as a commandment for you and your sons for generations. So when you come to the land that the Eternal will give you, as He promised, you will fulfill this tradition. And when your children will ask you, what kind of ritual is this? You will say, this is the Passover offering for the Eternal who passed over the houses of the sons of Israel in Mitzrayim when He killed the sons of the Mitzrayim and He passed over our homes.
Jeszcze jedno znaczenie słowa Pesach. Z jednej strony
So here we see this double meaning. On the one hand, Pesach is the Pesach sacrifice, but on the other hand, we have Passover. And here this is a verb. So it means to pass by, to bypass. So death spared these homes.
już szukamy, co jeszcze może
And
być
if we look for
ważne.
some additional meanings of the word Pesach,
Bardzo ciekawym jest
then we
też
have an
stwierdzenie
interesting observation by Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki.
Shlomo Yitzhaki,
This
a
is a
więc
rabbi that we all know, namely Rashi.
Rashi nam mówi,
So Rashi tells us that besides all the other meanings that it leaped, Pasach also says that
który hula,
it's someone who is leaping, but it also means vehamalti. So I will show you mercy. So in the prophets, like Ishayahu, he finds the meaning of Pasach as showing mercy over someone. So here we see great love and great kindness when he passed over the homes, but at the same time, he showed mercy on those families. Pesach is celebrated for 7 days in the month of Nisan, from Nisan 15th to Nisan 21st. That's the tradition in the land of Israel and also in Reform Judaism. Whereas in Orthodox Judaism, they celebrate until Nisan 22nd in the diaspora. Why? There is a very simple explanation. So, in the early times of the Mishnah, the calendar was not set yet. So you always had to wait for witnesses to come and say, yes, I can testify that the month has begun, but they could never be certain. So they decided that just in case, they will celebrate for 2 days. Nowadays, there is no such need because we already have a set detailed calendar. We can check everything and no one goes out to the field to take a look at the moon and wait until the witnesses come to the Beit Din and they say, yes, now we can start the new month. We no longer do that. So in Reform Judaism, we celebrate just like they do in the land of Israel for 7 days. The first and the last days are Yom Tov, so festive days, and the days in between are Chol HaMoed, so semi-holidays.
w trakcie święta. Ale święto ma jeszcze kilka nazw.
But this festival is also known by a couple of other names. Another name, which can also be found in the Torah, is Chag HaMatzot, so the Matzah festival. What is Matzah? So the Torah tells us, 3 times a year you shall hold the festival for me. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, Chag HaMatzot, for 7 days. So we have the festival of matzah, and we have an explanation of what matzah is, unleavened bread. And that's where the name of the festival comes from the matzah that was eaten according to the commandment, especially on the first day, whereas on the other days it is something eaten instead of bread. But as we look at how the Torah describes this festival, we can see a clear distinction between the Passover sacrifice, Pesach, and the Matzah festival. So in Parasha Pinchas, we read, in the first month, and here let's note that in the biblical times, the Jewish year started not in the month of Tishrei, like right now, in the fall, but by the first month on the 14th day, so the month of Nisan. So in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, there shall be a Passover sacrifice to God. And on the 15th day of that month, a Hag, a festival, unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. So we see that the Torah itself already distinguishes. It says we have this holiday, festival, but we also have this other one. In the times of the Second Temple, these differences were gradually disappearing, and the name Pesach was started to be used as a synonym of the festival of Matzah. So, how can we explain that?
Antropologicznie
Well,
można powiedzieć, że
anthropologically, we could
zanim
say that in the
Izrael
old
wyjdzie z
times,
Egiptu, zanim
before
wyjdzie z
the
niewoli,
Exodus, most
prawdopodobnie
probably
istniało
there were two
takie
festivals.
ogólnoświatowe
One, the festival
festiwum,
of
które
unleavened bread,
kojarzy się nam z
and this is
ludźmi,
something that we associate with the
mieszkańcymi
people who lives
ziemi
on a land, who
i
has to work the land, who has to bring its offerings, its sacrifices from the land that they
ofiara
are working
z
at.
mięsa, no to
But if we have a meat offering, then it comes from a different type of
my
people,
jesteśmy
the ones who are on the way, who are wandering. So we are
naszej
both
historii
of these things.
bardzo
In the
dawnej,
old
przedwiosennej,
times,
chyba raczej
in the pre-biblical
mogło się znaleźć
times,
kilka
there
różnych
were
wersji.
several
A jak
different
powiedziałam,
rituals, but in
według
the
tych
times of the Second
tradycji
Temple, there is no longer any difference. And the Matzah
nazywają się
festival
Hag
and
Hamatzot.
Pesach is just a synonym of Hag Hamatzot, and they are celebrated in the same time.
Tora
So, how does the
rozwiązuje
Torah
temat.
explain the eating of matzah? Does anyone remember?
Dlaczego trzeba
Why do we
spożywać
have to
matzę
eat matzah?
w to święto? Bo
And
przecież sama coś
where does
oznacza.
this matzah come from, anyways?
Dlaczego
Why not regular bread? Why
Dlaczego
unleavened bread?
Dlatego, że po
Well,
prostu można
because
było
the
szybko
children of Israel
uspokoić
were
się
in a
potrzeby
rush and they
aż
couldn't wait for
chleb
the bread
rośnie.
to grow.
Właśnie,
Exactly.
tak się
They
spieszyli,
were in such a rush
ciasto, które
and they
wcześniej
baked
było
unleavened
za
cakes
kwaśne,
of
ponieważ
the
nie
dough that they had
spiekło
taken out
się
of Egypt, for it was
tak
not leavened.
aromatycznie. Dlaczego?
That's how the Torah explains
Jeść
why they
matzę
had to eat
tak
matzah.
długo.
So, matzah is a reminder to us about how they were leaving Egypt in a rush. And
Teraz
now,
mówmy,
another term, hametz.
co to jest
What is
hametz, czego nie
hametz?
wolno
Something that you cannot eat during this festival.
Ów
This is a
termin
term from the
właściwy
Torah, and
oznacza
it
jedzenie, przygotowanie
means
jedzenia z
food
typu
that comes from five types of cereals and water
najczęściej tego
that has
wszystkiego
been fermented.
to są rodzaju
So these are wheat, barley,
pszenicy,
spelt, oats,
owiec i
and
żywności.
rye.
I później mędrcy nasi postanowili, że
Then our
trzeba
sages were
przeliczyć
trying to
czas,
establish how
żeby
much time has to
przygotować
pass
owsa
until
z
spelt or oat
przygotować do
is combined with water, and they
18
decided it's
ludzi.
18
Oni
minutes.
opisali 18 minut.
And
Dlaczego?
why 18 minutes?
To tak
They
samo
said it's just as if you'd go from one town to another, and everyone would start to count how many minutes it takes to get from one town to another, and it was 18 minutes, so hence the 18 minutes. So this doesn't mean that it took them 18 minutes to pack their bags and leave Egypt. Someone told me that one time. No, that's not the point. But this is the average time that was decided upon. So that's why most flour products, such as bread, cakes, and cookies, are considered hametz. So you cannot eat them during the festival of Passover. And the same goes for beverages made from these grains, such as beer
Whisky.
or whiskey also. But our tradition went even further. So in Israel, when Pesach approaches, it's difficult to find anything because everything is wrapped in nylon. The only thing is that's open is kasher Pesach with the addition kitniot. This is what's still open. So what is kitniot? Yes, it's beans, rice. But why is it forbidden? The Torah does not mention that. Legumes are not hametz. But there is this custom that says that we will try not to eat rice, beans, soybeans, broad beans, all this is forbidden. And why?
Zwyczaj ten jest zwyczajem
This custom is widespread mainly in some Ashkenazi communities.
Więc wiemy, że
So we know that it was observed in Europe, partially in some North African communities, such as Morocco, which is not so far away.
powstaje u nas w średniowieczu.
It originated in the Middle Ages.
Przyczyną jego z jednej strony nazywa
So, on the one hand, it said that people were afraid that there would be some confusion, that someone may mistake legumes for hametz and they may eat something by mistake. Or sometimes it's because they would buy this in the same store, a non Jewish store. They would buy the lentils, for example. So, let's say someone wants to go buy some lentils in Germany or Poland, and there in the same store you will also have bread, rye, wheat. So maybe we shouldn't eat neither of these things. But here additional questions arise because this means that they were able to buy food in a non-Jewish stores, and this means that we were able to do that. There were no kasher seals and so on, because every housewife knew exactly what can be eaten and what is not kosher. But well, the further we go in time, the more strict the rules we invoke. So in Ashkenazi communities, it was decided we would not eat legumes as well. But it only applies to some Ashkenazi Jews, so Jews from Yemen, Iran, Iraq, or Kurdistan have never heard of that. And after they made Aliyah to Israel, and they said, no, it's kosher for us. So they simply do not have such a tradition. So in Israel, we have some rice related products, but it is written, but for those who do eat legumes. So there is a note like that. And now, as for hametz, it is said in the Torah that we have to clean out hametz from our homes. That's why we have some new traditions. For example, bdikat hametz, which means checking our home if there is no hametz left in there. So we have to clean the whole house, and then we have to check once again. And after we check, we have to find something. And after we find it, we have to burn all of it. But this is more of a symbolic tradition. So we are looking for it. And how do you look for it? Well, still in the 21st century, you have this tradition to take a feather to look for it with a feather, with a candle. You know, it would be easier by electric light, but no, you have to do it by candlelight because that's the tradition. So we are continuing this tradition. And this tradition is taking up new meanings. According to Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings, the sequence of actions, first checking the hametz and then destroying it, reflects a person's inner spiritual work in the service of God. So, as we are checking for hametz, this explanation tells us that it's just like preparing a vessel. The person is the vessel, and they are cleansing the hametz within themselves, so that the light that is revealed on Passover by cleansing and removing impurities can enter that vessel. So if we look at their explanation, we see that checking for hametz is actually self-analysis, heshbon nefesh.
uświadomienie sobie,
It's realizing and experiencing one's own imperfection. So,
czyli
self-analysis,
dokonujemy na przykład
something that we do, for example, before Rosh Hashanah.
spalanie
Biur Hametz, burning Hametz. They also explain it in a more spiritual, intellectual way. This is a higher level, a revelation of love. It's an inner desire, yearning of the heart. There is this inner fire that comes from above.
Możliwie, nawet niemożliwe, wiadomo, że zaczęło się to wszystko z
So we know that this all stems from some very specific customs, but our tradition is deep enough that it constantly needs to add some more in-depth spiritual explanations.
jeszcze jedna nazwa.
And one more name for this festival,
Jest to
Hag HaAviv,
w języku
To
hebrajskim
the
wiosna.
festival of spring.
to wiosny. Pani Barbara nam mówi współczesne.
Barbara just gave us the contemporary meaning of the word Aviv. Today,
Mówimy, że to jest wiosna.
Aviv means spring.
Ale jednak kiedy otwieramy Torę i czytamy,
But if we open the Torah and we read,
Aviv, Vasita
observe the month of Aviv and offer a Passover sacrifice to the eternal your God.
czyli słowo
So the word Aviv is a name of a month. That's the first thing.
Tutaj mamy jeszcze lepsze tłumaczenie. To jest tłumaczenie cylkowa.
And here we have the Polish translation of Cylkov, and he also tells us what this name means.
które znamy dzisiaj w tradycji w kalendarzu żydowskim, jest pochodzenie
So not all the names of the Jewish months that we have today is of Jewish origin. For example, Tishrei or Nisan are quite late. We won't
przyszły do nas
find them in the Torah. They came after the Babylonian enslavement.
Shiru i
So Tishrei,
początku
the months of the beginning.
hebrajskim w Torze. Kilka miesięcy
So some months have their own names, and usually they are just called the first, the second, the third month, and so on, just like the days of the week. So here we say that one month has its own name, Aviv. You don't have many months that have their own names, and this means the months of years.
Wiadomo,
And
dlaczego?
why?
Na pewno przez to, że zaczyna się
That's because that's when our cereal starts to grow.
ale dla midraszów prawda
But
historyczna
for the Midrash, the historic truth is of no relevance.
najważniejsze
For the Midrash, what's the most important is the idea, and the Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah explains it in a different way. Can someone please read the Midrash for us?
Tak. Rabbi Akiva powiedział.
Rabbi Akiva said, he took them out only in a month during which it was propitious to depart, not in Tammuz due to the heat, and not in Tevet due to the cold, but in Nisan, which is propitious for setting out on a journey, neither extreme heat nor extreme cold.
czyli podkreślali
So it's no coincidence that the exodus from Egypt took place exactly in this period.
specjalnie dlatego, żeby naród Izraela miał
It was to make sure that the conditions for the children of Israel are as good as possible. So this was done on purpose. It was always done in preparation of entering the land.
w okresie,
We know this from other books.
kiedy mówimy o świętowaniu Pesach,
So in the biblical period, when we talk about celebrating Pesach, it was related to pilgrimages that were made to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices in the temple.
z początku
So at first we see a description in the Torah that everyone should offer a sacrifice in their homes during the first evening of their festival so that everyone can mark their home as a Jewish one. so that death and all of that can pass over, Pesach. And then we recall the Exodus and we make the offering of the Pesach sacrifice in the temple. So it's supposed to be a healthy male lamb. So the Torah explains in detail what the sacrifice should be. And when it comes to pilgrimages to Jerusalem, Passover is one of the three festivals, Shalosh Regalim. And what are the other two ones? Shavuot and Sukkot. Yes, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Three festivals when you had to go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. You had to go there, offer a sacrifice. The Torah doesn't say that you should go to Jerusalem, to that specific place. The Torah is not so specific. It says to a place that the Lord will select. So we know that he selected Jerusalem, but that is not said explicitly in the Torah. And I think this is no coincidence. So before the destruction of the Second Temple, Passover is a pilgrimage festival. It was a night during which the Pesach offering was eaten in Jerusalem. So we can imagine that it's not like the whole family would go there. It's hard to imagine that someone from Galilee takes their grandfather, grandmother, all their children, all their elderly, and they all walk on foot to Jerusalem. And they would leave their whole farm behind. So that was not possible. Most probably, some professors say that the younger ones would go there who were healthy enough, who had enough time. Maybe they did it on behalf of the whole family. And one time I heard this explanation that maybe someone could do it just once in their lifetime, like you do Hajj to Mecca in Islam. So Hajj resembles the word Hag, festival, our Hebrew one. So maybe you could only do it once in your lifetime to actually go to the temple. We don't know that exactly, but it is said that everyone is obliged to do that, but it's hard to imagine that. So it was a journey to Jerusalem. And we see that there is an offering of the sacrifice, but there is no Passover Haggadah. There is no retelling the story of the Exodus back in those times. This was all added later. In the times of the temple, the central element was offering the sacrifice. But well, what can be done? After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, the celebration had to return to its original places, to the Jewish home, and to new local places of worship, that is, to synagogues, because synagogues already existed in the final days of the Second Temple, and that's when we start having a Haggadah, a text that was written after the destruction of the temple, largely as a response to that event, because we say, well, if for so many centuries we have celebrated the Passover festival by offering sacrifices in Jerusalem, in the temple, then how should we celebrate it now? How can you offer sacrifices if there is no temple? How to celebrate this festival? So suddenly there is a different type of celebrating, a ceremonial dinner on the evening of the beginning of Passover, so the Passover Seder. We can also imagine that this Seder was already observed when the temple was still there, because as we said, not everyone was able to go to the temple. For example, Philo from Alexandria. How would he go to Jerusalem? Even though the temple is still there, he was not able to make it there. So he would just sit down somewhere, read something, eat dinner. They would be telling stories about what happened, but they are not able to go there. So the temple still exists, but this is the beginning of the Haggadah. And now let's talk about the origins of the Haggadah. So, what was the original basis of the celebration of the festival besides eating meat? So, we eat it with the bitter herbs, with unleavened bread, and so on. But so they shall eat it roasted over the fire, the flesh with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. But we also read that was for God a night of vigil to bring them out of the land of Egypt. So, what does it mean, a night of vigil? That means you should not go to sleep, you should be doing something. And the Torah also tells us that. And you will tell your son about the history of the Exodus, what the Eternal did to me when I was leaving Mitzrayim. And our next sources start to explore this history, to build up on it. So, Mishnah, the first work created after the destruction of the temple, describes the laws related to Hametz, the issues related to the Passover sacrifice. It discusses it in Tractate Pesachim. So for 9 chapters, we are discussing something that no longer exists. So for 9 chapters, we discuss how to offer a sacrifice. So we talk about Hametz and so on, but only the last chapter is devoted to what we today call the Passover Seder. Could someone read this? The first Mishnah from the 3rd chapter, Tractate Pesachim. Do we have a volunteer? On the eve of Pesach, right before Mincha, one should not eat until nightfall, so that they can eat matzah in the night with good appetite. Even the poorest in Israel should not eat until they do not recline comfortably, just as free people do during their meal. And those who are giving charity, they should not give a poor person less than 4 cups of wine for the celebratory meal on the night of Pesach. So this explained to us how we should celebrate Pesach in the times when the temple no longer exists. So we have the order, the Seder. It was probably existed in the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the editor of the Mishnah. And so what should you eat as a free person? What should you do? You should be semi-reclining, haseva. Even the poorest people should be eating in this position. And why? Because they saw that wealthy people, the Romans, ate like that, and you should give no less than 4 cups of wine even to the poorest people. We'll explain why, but you should do that. So we see something completely new, something wonderful. So the tractate in the Mishnah, even the 10th chapter, tells us about it. So 8 chapters talk about the 1 chapter talks about the Seder, but then you go back to discussing the sacrifice. So if we want to ask where did they get this idea from? Then I'd like to present a theory of modern
którzy mówią nam,
researchers. So they said that the form, not the content, but the form of what's happening during the Seder is related to the Greco-Roman feasting customs and table manners.
zachowania się przy stole. I taka analiza to było w XX wieku.
A detailed analysis of this phenomenon was presented in the 20th century by a couple of scholars.
Co to było w starożytnej Grecji?
So a symposium was a ceremonial feast in ancient Greece, often accompanied by conversation, wine, and entertainment with poetry. So, like in bohemian circles back in those times, of course, back then it was just for men. So some believe that our Jewish sages adopted the form of the symposium after the destruction of the temple to find a new form of celebration instead of the Passover sacrifice, which could no longer be offered.
Więc musimy podkreślić, że naród żydowski
So we must emphasize that the Jewish people did not live in isolation for centuries.
czerpał
They drew a lot from the culture surrounding them,
go otaczało, z kultury, która go otaczała. Ale
but
nie
they
bezkrytycznie, nie ślepo.
would not do it uncritically.
Formę, nawet powiedzmy,
So let's say they adopted the form of the symposium, but they completely changed its content.
ponieważ jeżeli Grecy, Rzymianie
Because whereas the Greeks and the Romans spoke of love, beauty, food, and wine, the Jewish sages during the Seder speak of the exodus from Egypt, the miracles of God, and the greatness of redemption.
o zbawieniu. Więc nawet kiedy szukamy, co oznaczają
So even when we try to find an explanation for the 4 cups of wine, we shouldn't say, well, so you get drunk. No, the 4 cups of wine mean the 4 promises of the Almighty, who said, I will lead you out of Mizraim. I will redeem you. I will liberate you. Bahafti, I will take you. That's why we have 4 of them.
później w Talmudzie.
Then in the Talmud, Rabbi Tarfon said,
Przedłużenie tego tekstu jeszcze jest
but this text goes on, Ve'afti, I will lead you into,
przyniosę.
I will bring you to this land.
I mówi nam się tak. Rabinu Tarfonowi powiedzieli, ale nie
Yes, but they told Rabbi Tarfon, but they will not accept us because we are in exile. But for example, right now I live in the land of Israel, in the state of Israel. So the question is, do we need the 5th cup? But they said, okay, let that represent the hope for delivery, redemption in the future. May it be the cup of Eliyahu. So in our tradition, he is a symbol of redemption. It is said that he did not die and he will come as the first signal of redemption in the future. So in his honor, we also have a 5th cup of wine. So what do we have on our Seder table? We have 6 elements, zeroah, so the meat on the bone that is not eaten, which is supposed to remind us of the Pesach offering, but it also represents the strong arm of the Almighty who led us out of Egypt. Beitza, an egg, a reminder of the Hagigah offering during the pilgrimage festival, maror, so the bitter herbs, a symbol of the bitterness of life in Egyptian slavery. Hazeret also represents bitterness. So in the Talmud, we have yet another reminder of the bitterness of slavery. Right now we use rain, Hazeret, Karpas, a symbol of spring. Right now, usually it's some non-bitter herb like parsley or celery, or in Ashkenazi tradition it could be a potato, because in this time of year it was hard to find something else, so they would eat potatoes. Haroset, which is the most tasty of all the elements, which was a reminder of the hard work of slaves, but it looks like clay. It is said that it resembles the clay from which bricks were made when they were building the Egyptian towns. So Haroset, and there are many different traditions. For example, in Europe, Haroset is made out of apples, of nuts, of something sweet, for example, honey. But for example, in Iran and Iraq, you, for example, use dates, or like a syrup of dates, or you make it into a paste. So it's quite interesting to see how even in the food we eat, we see differences within our traditions. So let's just sum up and let's talk briefly about the Haggadah. The Haggadah is the result of a development which took over 1500 years. At first, we had the first temple in biblical times. They would make pilgrimages to Jerusalem to offer their sacrifice. There was no set text. Then we have the second temple, which existed until the first century of Common Era. In the second temple, there is no testimonies of any conversations, any prayers. The only thing you have is the offering. Maybe at the end of the second temple period, people would gather if they were not able to come to Jerusalem, but there is still no set text. After the destruction of the temple, everything changes. We are in the era of Tanaim, so everything changes. The first text is the Mishnah. We've already read about the 4 cups. You have questions, Manishtana, what is different about this night? And we will hear that in every generation you should see yourself as the one who was delivered from slavery. That was in the Tanaim period, then Amoraim. The Talmud, 300 years later, would explain to us in the era of Talmud and Midrash, the material expense. So they describe in more detail what the Seder should look like. So people organize the Seder, they know what they should say, but there is still no fixed text. No one has written anything down. So the first text appears in the Gaonic Age, the first Haggadah. The first fixed passages that we start with, this is the bread of our poverty, halach ma'anya. This was introduced in the Gaonic Age. And then in the Middle Ages, so from the Gaonic Age until the Middle Ages, you have the first manuscripts. So if we count according to them how long the Seder should take, it would be about 15-20 minutes. And this also tells us that with every generation, the Haggadah would become thicker and thicker. So you would add more texts, more songs, more midrashim. So after the Gaonic Age, we invented printing, but before in the Middle Ages it existed in manuscripts. And then after the invention of printing, everything changed. Because now suddenly the Haggadah is printed in many copies, so that everyone can have a Haggadah at home. It is translated and illustrated. And then, starting from the 19th century, so the past 200 years, many different versions of the Haggadah have been created to remember from our history lessons that this is the time of emancipation, that new ideas appear, and the Haggadah represents all of that. In the 19th century, a new phrase was added, a traditional and at the same time a very new phrase. At the end of each Seder, you say, next year in Jerusalem. Then we say, we add in the rebuilt Jerusalem because that's the time when Aliyot started, immigration to Israel. And the Haggadah continues to evolve up to our times. In our times, we have many various Haggadot. Today, many people see Passover as a symbol of human freedom. You have Haggadot in Jewish communities that are not so connected to religion, but more to culture. For example, in kibbutzim, in secular communities, you have their own alternative Haggadot. So Passover from a religious festival becomes more of a cultural festival. So if you'd ask me what was happening yesterday in Israel, then everyone was spending time with their family. And this, regardless of how religious the family was, it doesn't matter. Everyone was spending time with their family. Someone was reading the Haggadah, someone would sing something for a short time, but everyone celebrates one way or another. So the Haggadah is not one coherent story, it's rather a collage of various fragments. It was created gradually, stage by stage. Here, that's an interesting example of a Haggadah from Germany, an Ashkenazi one, the beginning of the 14th century. Can anyone guess what's on the illustration?
A to nie jest
Isn't this the
rzeczywiście-
passing through the sea? Yes, and let's look at the interesting depiction of these creatures. Yes, they have the heads of birds. This is a Haggadah with bird heads depicting the crossing over the sea. So some parts are older. For example, a Had Mi Odea, who knows the one, who knows two, who knows three. Children really like this song. It dates back to the Middle Ages. There is an opinion that it comes from German songs. And why is it included in the Haggadah? So that children won't fall asleep. So they will listen, so they'll be waiting for the songs. Sometimes it is said that there is something very theatrical about celebrating the Passover Seder. Some sources from the late Middle Ages say that the head of the family, the father, would dress up as the prophet Elijah and tell the story. So there was even some entertainment in the celebration of the Passover Seder. Sometimes we add something new. We, for example, added a midrash that talks about our approach to enemies. We live in times when it's so easy to just surrender and become evil because the world is evil, so we'll be evil as well. That's why in my congregation in Haifa, every year we add to the Haggadah our passage coming from the Babylonian Talmud, from Tractate Sanhedrin, that tells us about our approach to enemies. So it says, in those times when the waters of the sea inundated the Egyptians, the angels wanted to sing a song before the Holy One, blessed be He, and He said, the creation of my hands are drowning in the sea, and you want to sing a song in front of me? So he is accusing them. And I think it's an important passage, a simple one, but it's worth remembering. And some new additions to the Seder, for example, an orange on the Seder plate. This is something new and it's a symbol of equality. It's related to many different stories. One of them says that Susanna Heschel, the daughter of the great thinker Abraham Yehoshua Heschel, said something interesting. So one day she asked her rabbi, when will women be called up to the Torah? And the rabbi said, a woman on a bima? It would be just as strange as if you had an orange on the Seder plate. So in some Reform communities, you will see an orange on the Seder plate that will remind us that there is a place for everyone by our table, for everyone who wants to be part of the story of the Exodus, for everyone who wants to be part of the Jewish people. There is a place for everyone. So there is a cup celebrating equality and peace, the cup of Miriam. So we talked about the cup of Eliyahu, and we also pour a cup for Miriam, the sister of Moses, who is always connected to water, because wherever she went, she would find water for the people of Israel. So we pour a cup of water for her and we say important words. The nation will not rise a sword against a nation, and they will no longer be learning how to wage war. So it expresses hope. It's hard to believe that it will take place someday, but this does not mean that we should not try to achieve it. And to conclude, one final name, Zman Heruteinu, the time of our freedom. In prayers, this festival is also called Zman Heruteinu, and this emphasizes that freedom is something very important. It emphasizes that the exodus from Egypt is not a one-time event from the distant past, but rather it's a process whose influence continues in every generation and in the life of every person. So I'd like to conclude with the poem of Rabbi Amnon Ribak. You can find it in the book Bazman. Every person needs to have their Egypt, to pull himself out of it with a strong hand or through clenched teeth. Every person needs a terror and great darkness, and consolation and a promise and salvation. For him to know how to lift up his eyes to the heavens, every person needs one prayer to be routinely in his mouth. A person has to be bent over just once. Every person needs a burden. Every person needs to have an Egypt land, to redeem himself from it, from the house of bondage, to go out in the middle of the night into the desert of fear, to step straight into the waters, to see them parting to both sides in front of him. Every person needs a shoulder on which to carry Joseph's bones. Every person needs to stand up straight. Every person needs to have an Egypt land and their Jerusalem and one long journey to remember forever through one's feet. The evening of the Seder, Leil Seder, symbolizes the transition from slavery to freedom.
mówi nam, że w każdym pokoleniu człowiek
It tells us that in every generation, a person has an obligation to see themselves as if they had personally come out of Egypt.
przechodzi z
Each
początku
person goes through their own path to freedom.
wolności. Sens Sederu.
The meaning of the Seder, it is this story that connects the liberation of the past with the redemption of the future, the transition from suffering to the world of salvation.
I poszukiwania
Looking for freedom.
każdy człowiek
So every person has their own Egypt,
z którego musi
and they have to
robić
come out of Egypt. They have to do it every year. So this time is a reminder for us, and this time is a chance for us.
okazją
It is a chance
zwyciężonego
to make sure that we become more free.
Dziękuję.
Thank you very much for your attention.